We all contain magic. The question is, how do you contain your magic? Welcome to Contain Her Magic, a space to rekindle your spark, embody your creative fire, and hold your power without burning out. I'm your host, Sonia Baillon. I'm a transformational coach, yoga educator, singer, and embodied alchemist. I'm here with you today to share the stories, the practices, and the awakenings that truly contain her magic. Let's begin. Welcome and welcome back to Contain Her Magic. This is part 2 of episode 6, Redefining Resilience with Karen Dean, mental fitness and mindset expert, resilient speaker, and best-selling author. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I encourage you to start there because that episode was about understanding. It was about naming something that many women feel but rarely talk about. Today is different. This episode is about looking at choice. This episode is about redefining how we think about resilience. It's about what becomes possible when we stop asking how to endure and start asking how we want to live. As I listened back to my conversation with Karen, what stayed with me wasn't just her story and all of her wisdom that she brings, because she's got tons to share and many, many golden nuggets in part 1 that she leaves us with. But it was also the space around it. Sometimes the pauses, the questions that didn't yet have answers. That was really where I leaned into after the interview and felt a need to reflect and to reframe. So that's where we're going to start. I want to return to Karen, not to repeat what we've already explored, but to listen from a different space. Because you said something earlier that I thought was interesting about wanting to be maybe softer and to be in your femininity. So we were just discussing that a little bit. I'm wondering, how do you think that women can reclaim that softness in this dynamic that we've just discussed? Do you see a light at the end of that tunnel?
I wish I had an easy answer for this, but I'm still struggling with it myself.
Yeah.
Is how, well, and in my situation, I don't have someone to do the things that require me to be in my male energy. Um, so it's finding that balance for me of how do I let go of that responsibility side of me, the very male energy part, and just get soft. And it's really a struggle because I've spent so much time being in that energy as, a business person and a homeowner, and I have like a 30-acre property and I have farm animals, and it's my normal to be in my more masculine energy.
Mm-hmm.
So I really am it's a work in progress for me to figure out how to be softer and more in that feminine side. And I would love somebody else to tell me how to make it easier.
This is where we begin to redefine resilience in a way that really, truly sustains us. In talking about, our past and our families, obviously we had a role as children and we've outgrown that role. We've become women. But it's interesting that you were saying to look in the mirror and say that you love yourself. It would be very easy to do if you were looking at your child or looking at your child's self. And as a mother now, or as a woman, a young crone, what advice would we give to that child? But beyond that, just how do you feel about that child? And what I've done to bring that energy forward, to always remind myself that I'm still that awesome little girl. I found a photograph of me when I was about 5 years old, and I put it up on the fridge next to the picture of my daughter and of my son. And every time I walk past it, I have this affection for this child because it's a child and it's me, but it's me being able to recognize now so many years later that I'm able to care for that little girl just like I've been able to care for my children.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It is powerful, and that's one of the things I talk to people about when I'm on stage is, the things we say to ourselves in the mirror. Would you say that to your 5-year-old self?
right.
Like, would you even, not even in the mirror, but in our own heads, the conversations we have with ourselves in our heads, the words we say about ourselves, the thoughts we have about ourselves, would you say that to your 5-year-old self or any 5-year-old? Would you
Hmm.
say that to your best friend? No.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at things now. If you look in the mirror and constantly say something negative to yourself, that's who you become. And
Hmm.
if you have those negative thoughts, like you're programming your own brain. And is that what you want to believe about yourself? And oftentimes well, no, all of the time, those voices are somebody else's. It's somebody else's limiting belief
Yeah.
or somebody else's thought about you that
Hmm.
when I was in school, I was too skinny and I was too redheaded and I had glasses. And now, and those are the words people said to me. Well, I am not skinny anymore. And my brothers, when I saw them, were like, my God, your ass is some fat. I'm like, which is it? Like,
Yeah.
how do I make you happy? Either I'm too this or I'm too that.
Yeah.
And so it's about removing those voices and really finding your own voice and building yourself up and making sure that the words you say are always positive to yourself.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that is not being egotistical. That is just being human.
Yeah. Very well said. And in fact, we are so formed by our environment. It's normal. It's survival, right? Like
Yeah.
as humans, as beings on this planet, our environment, by the very nature of the fact that we interact with it for our survival, is huge in terms of forming who we have become. To then turn that inward is a massive shift that isn't innate. It's not a given that a person is going to have those skills. So I think that's where, when you've taken the time to cultivate some practices like the meditation and anything that allows you to look inward or take a time for yourself, like yoga and breathing and so many other things, this starts to cultivate that muscle that isn't necessarily something that we're born with. Um, Definitely, I think we're born with an idea that we're pretty awesome, and it's
Yeah.
along the way we get layers of stuff that over the years we kind of just have to, like, brush off or pare off, whatever it may be. But so it's a process of removing layers to get back to your true essence. But from a real, like, physiological survival, we're a being in an environment where we need to adapt constantly. I think that it's something that we need to, again, talk more about. And the self talk, well, certainly is a good way to begin, is to catch yourself and say, when I'm having a conversation in my own head, is this loving or useful? These are the
Yeah.
two things. Is it useful because maybe it's a survival thing. Like, I need to get out of here. This is dangerous. That's useful.
Yes.
But then this sort of, self-regard negativity that brings us down or that limits our actions, that's not loving and it's not useful. So
And the
those are
self-doubt,
my
like,
guidelines.
yeah. And if you feel I can't do this, I like to think about whose voice is that? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Does
Because
it
it's not
belong to
my
you?
voice. Because if we were born with that voice, we would never walk or talk because we never stood up and started walking. We stood up, we fell down, we stood up, we fell down. If we believed in failure and self-doubt back then, none of us would ever walk or talk. So
Hmm.
it gets programmed into us as we get older by other people's voices saying, you can't do that. Because as toddlers, we think we can do anything. you
Hmm.
know it truly, or we would never be able to develop those skills that are just basic skills like walking and talking.
Yeah,
If I was learning to walk and I was like, screw this, I'm not doing this, too hard, where would I be?
exactly. So we don't
And as
have that
adults,
filter.
yeah, and as adults we often do, no, screw this, that's too hard, I'm not doing this. But just
Uh-huh.
think, if you pushed through and stood back up and tried
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. or surround yourself with people who believe in you and
Yeah,
tell you, so you can tell yourself, but then also find your tribe, find the people who are going to support you in that.
sure.
So I've talked about the mission of this podcast being to help women to rekindle their spark and their creative fire without burning out. And we've talked to you about what it means to be a resilient woman for you, and a little bit about the tools that you use to help yourself. And I would imagine you share these tools with the women who come to you who for coaching, and when you do your public speaking. But let's talk a little bit more about that, because that's where we connect. I'm very much a person that looks at the process of change and transformation from the bottom up. We talk about our stories. It's important to share. But at the same time, I'm a believer that it's not the best idea to continuously reinforce that. Just like we were talking about in terms of mindset and what you say to yourself, if you keep coming back into the old stories, sometimes we reinforce the pattern as opposed to finding relief. I know that when I overshare, I call it that, when I know after a conversation, I don't feel good, I feel depleted, and it can sometimes happen when I realize, wait a minute, I didn't need to talk about that. What I needed was to sit with that and feel that, not talk it out of existence.
Right.
So coming back to the body-based practices. So this bottom-up approach as we move in through the pathways of the nervous system, and specifically through breath work. I know that you use breath work as a way to recenter yourself. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and how you coach other people?
The thing that I like to talk about the most, when we talk about breath work and what you, I know, do and yoga practitioners do, we do the really conscious breathing. And that is so valuable when you have time. But if you're in those freeze situations where maybe you're at work and your boss wants to have a difficult conversation, or you're in an abusive relationship and there's something that's happening in the moment and you don't have time to stop and do a big box breathing exercise.
Hmm.
What I've practiced with myself a lot, because normally when something hard happens, our shoulders go up, our tongue goes to the roof of our mouth, we just tense up. And in the moment, I have taught myself to lower my shoulders and remove that tongue from the roof of my mouth. And in my head, I'm saying, breathe, Karen, breathe, Karen, breathe, Karen, because we hold our breath.
Hmm.
And when we do that, we're depriving our brain of oxygen. It needs to actually make a decision. And when you can even pause for those couple seconds to just start breathing again, you make a healthier choice.
Hmm.
Um, Instead of that instinct of, if you are the abuser, hit first and ask questions later. I think we really need to reprogram our brains to pause and start that breathing again in any situation in our lives to make healthier choices. And I think that's an important tool we need to teach our kids, to breathe first before you react. Even 2 seconds of breathing can change an entire situation. And the example I use is my daughter's friend, when they played soccer and in high school. This kid's mom's first game she ever missed in her life, because she was going to a Reba McEntire concert. And she was like, Karen, can you make sure Brooke's okay? Yeah, no problem. And it's the only time her kid ever got injured in a game. And the coaches and the refs were standing over this child as she's screaming her lungs out and not say anything to her. So she just keeps screaming. And parents are not supposed to go on the field, but I did anyway, because I break rules. And I went out and I stood over her and I said, look at me. And she opened her eyes and I said, breathe, breathe,
Hmm.
breathe. And she started breathing. And when she started breathing, it didn't hurt as bad. And then within, 30 seconds, she was able to get up and walk off the field. It was like an ankle injury.
Yeah.
And she walked off the field. And before the game was over, she was back on the field. These
Hmm.
guys thought they were going to have to call an ambulance. because she was just hyperventilating and just freaking out and no one was calming her down. And that is one example where I just started to think about how different our lives would be if we just remembered to breathe.
It is so important. One, it's the first thing and the last thing you do in your lifetime.
Yeah.
We should learn more about it. We do it
Yes.
all the time and we don't think about it. But it's interesting how when you start to think about it, you start to be able to have a better relationship with it. And it is what sustains our life. So not only does it bring oxygen into your body, the oxygen feeds all of your cells, that gives you energy, but also breathing is what you were saying, the thing that shifts when we're in a stressful situation. So when
Yeah.
we're faced with a stress, and that brings us back to this whole idea of our innate survival mechanisms, it's normal that when we have a negative experience, A, we're going to hang on to it because we don't want to repeat it because our survival depends on it. And B, that we're going to start to shift our physiological response in order to be prepared for a threat. So it's that whole
Yeah.
fight or flight, or sometimes freeze when we don't have the ability to fight or to run from the danger. Then we freeze because we don't know what else to do and we disassociate, a little bit like what we were talking about with that burnout response. But as soon as you come back to the breath, what you're actually doing is retraining your nervous system to say, everything's okay. Yes,
Yeah.
you responded beautifully. Body intelligence, number one, like everything that you should have done, you did. Thank you, body, for responding that way. However, I've outgrown this. So, like moving beyond a critical situation, but in a chronic stress situation,
Yeah.
when we always have that mechanism going off in our bodies, it's easy to get stuck in it. And then we have to retrain ourselves to say, wait a minute, I have a choice. And if I bring my attention to my breath, so energy flows where attention goes.
Yeah.
And I bring energy back to initiating my parasympathetic nervous system response, which basically is rest, repair, and digest. So we come back to that very, very basic physiological thing that we always do that is the key to self regulation.
Yeah.
And once we understand that, then we start to have tools to be able to move beyond and not be in the mercy of the situation and to be in victim mode and to be empowered.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just about consciously breathing. And I am so in tune with it now that I can't, if I hear the word breath, I take a deep breath. If I
Hmm.
read the word breath in a book, I take a deep breath. You have to really get in tune with your breathing and
Yeah.
know when to turn it on. And then you can actually see that sometimes the danger you think is a danger isn't actually a danger because your brain now
Hmm.
can actually work instead of
Yeah.
just like in panic mode.
Yeah. Exactly. Definitely breathing is something that's accessible for everybody. And it's definitely the first line of transformation is
Yeah.
breathing. Yeah.
And our first line of defense from everything.
Yeah. Yeah. That or, screaming. Well, it's true, actually. Like
Yeah.
there's in terms of, well, in terms of also evacuating stress. So I'm going to segue just a little bit. There's also the idea of movement. So I'm a big believer in that. So when I know that I've got something that's riling me up and I don't feel settled, first thing I want to do, I must have a strong flight response because the first thing I want to do is move. And I will literally get out of the house, go for a walk, get some fresh air, clear my head. But the movement, just using my arms and my legs, the back and forth of the left to right side of the body moving together, and having a method of evacuating all of those stress chemicals that come up in your body, I find to be an invaluable tool. Do you do something like that? Do you have a
Uh,
movement practice?
I do, and it's actually a lot easier now that my kids are not here as much because they don't tell me to not do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I put either 90s dance music or Taylor Swift on my Bluetooth speaker as loud as I like, bust your eardrums kind of loud. And I dance
Uh-huh.
around my house, whether it's
Yeah.
like while I'm cooking dinner or whatever. I crank it up if I'm vacuuming, whatever it is, and takes us back to our university days at Vinnie's Pub. But I dance it out. I literally dance it out because, sometimes I just don't want to go outside, but, I do go
Hmm.
for walks often as well. But when it's dark and rainy or whatever, and you just want to be in the house, crank the music up. And I also do it when I drive. That's a lot of my kind of reconnection with myself time is when I'm
Hmm.
driving by myself, is I crank the music up and just sing in my truck. I dance in my seat. I'm like the
Hmm.
chick at the stoplight that people are like, what is she doing? That's me. And
Who's that lady?
yeah,
So music
music
speaks
for
to you.
me is huge. So
Yeah. I think music is a really good way for a lot of people to connect to something else rather than the chatter of your mind. Music allows you to still dream and to still sort of be in your own bubble. Karen, I've got to ask you a couple of very essential questions to the podcast. This is about um, relationships and rewriting the story, if you will. If you look at your life, what patterns have you had to release to make room for the good stuff like love and trust and joy?
I've had to release the thought that it is my job to make somebody else happy and it is somebody else's job to make me happy. That has been the biggest change in relationships for me, is to
Hmm.
realize I can't make them happy and they can't make me happy. I have to make me happy and they have to make themselves happy. And I think that's a pressure we humans put on ourselves, is that we think it's our job to make other people happy, but it's not.
Yeah, there
And
there is a lot.
proud. Proud is another word too. Proud is something I always wanted to make my mom proud. I've never accomplished that, no matter how many cool things I've done. And then I realized she's not the one that has to be proud of me. I
Hmm.
have to be.
Yeah, it's your own self-value and your own self-worth because at the end of the day, that's what we've
I'm all
got.
I've got. There have been days when I'm the only person I had.
Hmm.
And you really have to know yourself to get through those days.
Agreed. Well, how about for women healing from heartbreak or betrayal? What advice would you give them to help them to be open to the good stuff, like I was saying, to love, to trusting, to feeling joy?
First, we need to repeat in our heads or out loud or whatever the one thing I already said: I deeply and completely love myself, but also this wasn't about me. The choices other people make are their
Yep.
choices. When we are in relationships with abusive or narcissistic people, those people tend to put blame on us for everything going wrong. And as adults, we all have agency over our own choices,
Hmm.
and the choices they made are not yours to own. And that's, I think, the most powerful thing that I've had to learn was this wasn't about me.
Hmm.
They made those choices. I mean, I messed up too, but you have to understand that you can't fix what they did. You can only fix what you did.
Hmm.
Make yourself a better person and learn from whatever that situation was. Learn how to not repeat that.
And so maybe I could sum that up as an act of self-forgiveness.
Yeah. No, that's actually the most powerful thing, is we talk about forgiving other people, but we never talk about forgiving ourselves. We never look at, can I forgive myself for the things that maybe weren't the best choice that I could have made?
Hmm.
But
Yep.
also, in forgiving ourselves, what have I learned from this? How can this help me do, feel better as I continue in the future? There's so many elements to what people consider failure. I don't believe in failure. I believe everything that people perceive as failure is a growth spurt. It's painful at the time, but you're going to get bigger and better.
Yep. No mud, no lotus.
Right? That's right.
What is it? So like your bullshit is the best fertilizer for my spiritual growth.
Well, as a farmer, that's actually one of the analogies I use in my speech is, do we water or do we tend to the negative thoughts like the weeds in our garden, or do we tend to the positive thoughts, which are the flowers and the vegetables?
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, shit is the best fertilizer there is. So, do we use this shit to grow the flowers or do we use the shit to grow the weeds?
Time to weed things out. I
Yeah.
agree. Karen, this podcast is called Contain Her Magic. So the idea of the container I've explained really is yourself and having enough ability to and strength to hold all of your energy and your life force and your vitality so that you can do awesome things in your life. That is a very easy way to describe, I think, the essence of this podcast. What does containing your magic mean?
I live outside of boxes usually. So, yeah, I know I am a container, but I'm not containing anything, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. I don't fit traditional boxes, and I really like that about myself. And I think our magic comes from jumping out of that container, like the container of other people's thoughts and
Hmm.
traditional, generational limits that have been put on us. I think containing our magic is actually releasing our magic and letting
So
the
we
rest of
can,
the world see it.
I like this. I like the idea of emptying out the container first,
Yeah.
but I'm going to suggest that then we refill it with the things that really nourish us.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah. And that's those practices I talked about is in order to refill, you have to learn to just be and
Hmm.
be in the quiet and remove everybody else's voices and just be and figure out who that is. Who is the being inside of you? We spend so much time doing, but we don't spend enough time being. That's where my power comes from, is when I can just be. That's where my best business ideas come from. That's every amazing thing I've ever done has come from when I just got quiet.
Yeah, and allowed your inner voice to rise up.
Yeah. And shut out all those other voices that are telling me you can't, you shouldn't, you're this, you're that, you're too much of this or too little of this.
Hmm.
Shut those voices out and just let your own voice come to the surface.
So who are you then? If I said in 3 words, describe Karen Dean.
Fierce. That's actually the license plate on my truck, and nobody can see it on an audio, but it's behind me on my shelf. Uh, Fierce, fun, because I do love to have a lot of fun. Bold.
I like it. And I'm going to agree. I've always found Coco to
And you
be
know what?
fierce, fun, and
10 years ago,
especially
I wouldn't
bold.
have been able to say those words.
Yeah.
And another thing that so many women I work with have trouble with is when you ask who you are, you say, I'm a mom, I'm a business person, I'm a this. We don't look at who we really are. Like we use titles to describe ourselves. And I try to work with women to remove that. Like, who are you beyond those titles? Who's
Yeah.
underneath all of that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're working in the same direction for sure. I
Who
try.
knew we would get here
I know it's
so many years
crazy.
later?
Yeah, yeah, it's a full circle kind of moment, and well, like you're describing with women too, and like with your journey, and to a great degree mine as well, where we begin a certain way as children, we've got a particular essence, and then we grow up, things happen, we get the voices from other people, we go through life experiences, we learn, we change, we renew, we do it again until we get to a point where we can consolidate. And in the end, what usually happens is that we come back to the essence that we were probably when we were kids, that we've always had inside of us.
Yeah,
um, and I try to help people to remember that through body wisdom techniques, but also obviously in retelling of stories and sharing other people's stories like we're doing here today.
yeah.
So come back to yourselves. I think that
And
really
just
is,
be.
that's where your power is.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
If you had to have a slogan for a women's empowerment rally, what would it be?
Uh, I'm actually working on one of those, so I don't want to give it away.
Ah, okay, okay. You don't have to tell us. Well, you will
To
have to,
be
but
to be announced.
all right. Well, speaking about your upcoming plans, tell us what you've got cooking in the cauldron, if you will, for 2026. What's going on and what kind of programs or projects are you involved in?
My biggest project right now is getting my next book finished. I have a lot of people asking for it, and I think that's a pretty good sign.
Hmm.
So I am writing my next book, which is all my story. Not I'm not sharing other women's stories, just my own of kind of the things that I've been through and the tools that I've used to get through them and still have an amazing life and be relatively successful and raise good kids. So it's just the theme of how do we get through a hard life and not make it as hard. And so that is my goal, is to get that book done. I've been working on it for a while. It's kind of hard in ways to write about the past because even though you've healed from it, you have to kind of relive it to write about it. So yeah, it takes a little bit of time to work through that, and I want to get that done. Working on bringing a really prominent, amazing speaker to Halifax for an event. I just got that a little further in the process yesterday, so I'm really excited about that. To have an Oprah moment and share the stage with someone who I admire greatly. And
Hmm.
I'm going to be doing some other events for women about the things we've talked about today, about coming back to ourselves and discovering who we are as midlife women and, stepping out of the roles we've known for so long and who are we now.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And if our listeners want to know more about that, will they be able to get some information from your website?
Yes, KarenDeanspeaks.com is my website, and following me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm starting to do a little bit more on TikTok and LinkedIn as well. I'm on all of those, and I actually suggest following my personal Facebook page as well because I post a lot of fun stuff there that
She
gives
sure
you a
does.
little better look into who I am. And I have a lot more engagement on my personal page, so I share a lot there, but you can just hit follow on that as well. So
Okay. And what's your email address?
hello at KarenDeanspeaks.com.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for taking all
Thank
this time
you.
and chatting with me today. We're going to have to do it again sometime soon. Not
Yes.
just for a podcast interview, but we'll have to get together. I've been plotting a trip out to the Maritimes sometime
Oh,
soon. It's been a while, so it's time for me to go and dip my toes in that very cold Atlantic Ocean again.
yeah. It's getting warmer if that helps.
I've been sitting with this conversation since the interview ended. It's one that needed a little more space to breathe, a conversation that deserved a moment to let it land, so that I could reflect and respond to it with care. And what stayed with me most was not just what was said, but what was quietly living underneath it. So, this next part is not a conclusion, it's a response, a listening, a deepening, an offering back to what Karen so honestly named. So I think the big question that came up was, who am I? Not just who I've had to become, but who am I in essence? And who I've been shaped into through my lived experience. The question, who am I, is an overarching theme, not only in this conversation with Karen, but in the deeper conversation around resilience itself. Because how we answer that question, consciously or unconsciously, influences how we respond to life. It shapes what we tolerate, what we resist, what we believe is possible for us, and ultimately, what path we choose. So often, resilience is talked about as something we do, how we push through, how we endure, how we keep going. But beneath all of that is identity. Who you believe you are determines how you meet challenge. It determines whether softness feels safe or threatening, whether rest feels earned or forbidden, whether asking for help feels like failure or wisdom. And for many women, identity has been formed in seasons of survival, in responsibility, in holding it all together. So the question isn't, why is it hard to soften? I think the deeper question is, who did I need to become in order to survive? And who am I now allowed to be? There's a cycle that many women have to move through, often without realizing it. We become who we need to be in order to survive. We adapt. We grow strong. We learn how to manage, lead, and hold things together. And that version of us is not wrong. She's wise. She's capable. She is forged through experience. She didn't come cheap. But there comes a time when the cycle wants to change, when the identity that was once our protector begins to limit us. And that's when the deeper questions arise. Am I meant to keep becoming someone new, or am I being asked to reclaim who I was always meant to be? What is my role in this moment of my life? What is my true calling beneath the roles I've taken on and the responsibilities I've carried? This is not about rejecting who you've been. It's about honoring her and asking what wants to emerge next. Because breaking the cycle, this cycle of identity, doesn't mean abandoning your strength. It means allowing your strength to evolve and change. Change begins in the mind, as a thought, as a question, as a new possibility. But it doesn't stay there. It anchors in the body, as movement, as breath, as action. When you transform your body, you transform your life. Not because the body is something to fix, but because the body is where beliefs become lived experience. You can think about change all you want, but until your nervous system feels it, until your breath carries it, until your muscles move in a new way, your life will keep reflecting the old pattern. This is why real transformation is not just mental, it's embodied, it's practiced, it's lived. And change can happen quickly. It can. There are moments of insight, moments of decision, moments where something clicks. But most of the time, change happens in small, consistent steps, in subtle shifts, in everyday choices. It happens when you begin to respond differently to the same situation, when you pause instead of pushing, when you listen instead of overriding yourself, when you choose something nourishing instead of something depleting. These moments may not look dramatic from the outside, but over time, they do reshape your life. Because identity is not transformed in one grand gesture. It's reshaped through repetition, through what you practice, through what you come back to again and again. And this is so important to remember when we talk about softness. Softness doesn't arrive all at once. It's also cultivated. It's chosen. It's practiced gently and consistently. And this brings us to the difference between being and doing, between yin and yang, between feminine and masculine energy. For so many women, life has required us to live almost entirely in doing, in responsibility, in action, in getting things done. And there is wisdom in that. There is leadership in that. There is strength in that. The embodiment of healthy masculine energy gives us direction and the ability to get up when we fall. It's the strong container and protector of your magic. But being is something different. Being is a way of sitting with your feminine power. It is a surrender into now and acceptance of what is, and a boundary that says no to more of what depletes you, and yes to what nourishes you. The loss of energy is healed by containment. Being creates a container that offers you space for enough, a space for rest and renewal. It's your sanctuary, your moment of peace. When you focus your attention on being, it has no beginning and no end. It has no interruption. It's constant. And in that quiet, in that stillness, you begin to hear the echoes of your true self again. Allowing ourselves to just be is the doorway to softening into our power. And there is also a lot of power in the breath. Breath is always here. It's been with you through every version of yourself, through every season of your life. It is the tide that moves in and out of you, the rhythm that remembers you even when you forget yourself. When you soften into the breath, you soften into the body. And when you soften into the body, you soften into your life. The breath does not force, it does not rush, it does not demand. It invites, it carries, it restores. And it becomes a bridge between who you've been and who you are becoming. This brings us to mindset. When we talk about mindset, we're not just talking about positive thinking. We're talking about self-concept, about the relationship you have with yourself on the inside, the way you speak to yourself, the way you interpret your experience, the meaning you make of what you've lived through. Your self-talk becomes the atmosphere you live in, and self-care is not something separate from that. It's the way that that relationship becomes visible in your life. Self-care is how your beliefs about yourself turn into behavior. It's how respect becomes action. It's how listening to your inner voice becomes something you practice, not just something you understand. Softness grows where the inner voice is kind, where the inner world feels safe enough to rest, where your mindset shifts from harshness to understanding, from pressure to permission, from judgment to curiosity. Your whole experience of life begins to change. And so many women are living in a constant state of activation, holding responsibility, as I've mentioned many times, managing everything, staying alert, being hypervigilant. And when your system is always on, softness can feel unreachable, a bit dangerous. Not because you don't want it, but because your body doesn't yet feel safe enough to receive it. Stress is not just something that happens in the mind, it lives in your body. And resilience is not just about enduring stress, it's about completing the stress cycle through movement, through breath, through the alchemy of energy. When you move the body, when you allow sensation, when you let emotion pass through instead of holding it in, you give your system permission to reset. This is how resilience becomes something you live, not just something you admire. This is how the body learns. This is how it's allowed to come back into balance. And now this is where boundaries come in. Boundaries in your relationship with others and boundaries in your relationship with yourself. Because softness without boundaries can become depletion, but softness with choice becomes empowerment. Boundaries are not walls. They are not punishments. They are expressions of self-respect. They are the way you say, this matters. I matter. My energy matters. Empowerment begins when you remember that you have a choice about how much you give, a choice about what you carry, a choice about what you allow into your inner world. Softening does not mean giving everything away. It means choosing what truly belongs to you and what does not. And every time you choose in alignment with your truth, you strengthen the container that holds your magic. So let's get back to the core of this conversation. We're going to look at resilience, reframed, redesigned. So what is it really? What is resilience? Resilience is not just the ability to endure. We've seen that. It's not just about pushing through. We've spoken about that. Resilience is the ability to bounce back. Yes, to rise and to rise again. It's the capacity to meet life, but also rest when needed and return with renewed strength. Resilience is not only forged in struggle, it's nourished in rest, in listening, in compassion towards yourself. When resilience is supported from the inside out, it no longer requires you to harden. It allows you to stay open and still stand strong. This conversation revolved also around feminism, social justice, and the evolution of masculine and feminine dynamics. It's a big topic. There is real history here. There is also real injustice. There is real anger, and that has had a purpose. Feminism and social justice have been about naming what was wrong, about claiming voice, about refusing to stay silent, and all of that matters. But evolution asks something more of us. It asks us not only to fight what harmed us, but to imagine what could heal us. The relationship between masculine and feminine within us and around us is changing, not towards dominance, not toward erasure, but toward balance. Toward a place where strength and softness can exist together, where protection and presence can coexist, where power no longer requires hardness. This is not about going backwards. It's about going deeper. And let's dive a little deeper into our inner intelligence. Our intelligence is not just with the mind, but also with the body, with the heart, with the gut. Each of these centers carries its own intelligence, its own wisdom. The mind helps us make meaning. The heart helps us know what we value and love. The gut helps us sense what is safe and true. So often we've been taught to trust one and ignore the others, to think our way through everything, to override sensation, or to dismiss intuition. But wisdom is not located only in one place. It lives in the conversation between them. So the question becomes, where does your intuition speak the loudest? Is it in your chest? In your belly? Is it in the quiet knowing that comes when you stop trying to decide? And what would change if you trusted that voice a little more? I would love for you to share with me about that in the comments. So Karen and I spoke about the stages of life, the magic of midlife, and that young crone phase. These are seasons in a woman's life. And in every season, there's a time for something. Times for building, times for proving, and times for surviving. And then there comes a different season, a season where the questions change. Not how do I keep going, but how do I want to live? Midlife carries a particular kind of magic. It's the time when many women begin to see more clearly, to feel more deeply, and to choose more consciously. At the beginning of this crone phase, you are not old, but wise. It's a time of discernment, a time of truth, a time to choose yourself, not in opposition to others, but in devotion to what is real for you. This stage is not about withdrawing from life. It's about entering it differently, with more honesty, with more sovereignty, and with more alignment between who you are and how you live. There are common threads among women and their experiences through the stages of life. Learning, growing, blossoming, releasing, healing, becoming more fully yourself. And yet your journey is still your own. No one has ever lived your life. No one has felt what you felt in your body and in your heart. No one else carries your exact story. And that means something very important. It means that your path is shaped by choice. How you frame your experience is deeply transformative. You can see your life as something that happened to you or as something that is teaching you. You can see yourself as someone who endured or as someone who is evolving. It's still your story, and you're the one who gets to decide how it's told. When Karen said, I would love somebody else to tell me how to make it easier, in reference to moving into that more softer, feminine energy, what I heard was definitely not weakness. I heard wisdom. I heard self-awareness. I heard a woman who's carried a lot and is ready to relate to herself differently. And in many ways, what Karen is naming here is something that so many women are quietly wanting. Not to stop being strong, but to make life feel lighter. Not to give up responsibility altogether, but to feel more supported. In that sense, what Karen is touching on is what so many women want. A way to live with strength and softness, with leadership and ease, with resilience and nourishment. And in the conversation, when I asked Karen the question, how do you contain your magic? She clearly felt the urge to dump out that container. She wondered out loud if maybe her container had been too full of responsibility, full of holding everything together, full of other people's needs. And she spoke about wanting to release her magic, preferring to live outside the box and empty out this container isn't about doing less. She was talking about seeing herself differently, about recognizing that what she carries matters and that it deserves care. And that's where my work meets what Karen is naming, because the Contain Her Magic philosophy is not about holding back. It's about creating a strong, loving container for your energy, a container that protects what matters, a container that honors your limits, a container that allows your light to shine and be seen. And sometimes that means noticing what does not belong there anymore, like other people's expectations, old roles, old survival patterns, things that once had a purpose but no longer need to be carried. Releasing isn't losing, it's making space for something better. It's about choosing what nourishes you and letting go of what drains you. That is how softness becomes possible. not by giving up your strength, but by giving your strength a home. And when your strength has a place to live, then you can release your magic out into the world safely and let it shine. And when you do that, you lead by example. You become a beacon for others, not by force, but just by being you. And finally, this all rests on one very important thing: self-forgiveness. Because maybe this is how we soften, with wise self-compassion, with gratitude for what has been, with acceptance for what is, with belief in your abilities and your value, and with excitement for what is still possible. So many women carry regret, second-guessing, the sense that they should have known better, or done better, or chosen differently. But here is something I believe deeply. If you truly could have done better, you would have. Truly. You made the best choices you could with the awareness you had and the resources that you were given at that time. I want you to sit with that, feel through that, think about that. Let that sink in. Self-forgiveness is not letting yourself off the hook, though. It's letting yourself move forward. It's how the body softens. It's how the heart opens. And it's how the nervous system finally rests and feels safe. And from that place, softness is no longer something that you have to try to be. It becomes something you allow. It becomes the quiet power that nourishes your resilience from the inside out. And there's one more piece here. Sustainable resilience doesn't mean doing everything alone. It also means being open to receive when support is offered. For many women, learning to receive is as radical as learning to rest. Receiving doesn't diminish strength. It deepens it. And as a way to embody all this wisdom, I'd like to offer you a breathing practice. But before we move into the practice, I want to speak directly to those of you who are strong, capable, and quietly running on empty. If you know something needs to change, but you're not sure where to start, this is for you. As Karen was speaking, I kept thinking about how many women are living right on the edge of burnout, or maybe not even there yet, but they can feel the whispers, the subtle signs, the fatigue that lingers, the nervous system that doesn't quite settle, the quiet knowing that something needs to change. You don't have to wait for the storm to hit before you take care of yourself. The most powerful time to build resilience is before life demands it. That's why I created my Get Your Spark Back and Contain Your Magic 8-week transformational coaching program. This work is about building a foundation of wellness, vitality, emotional regulation, and embodied strength. So when stress shows up, you are better equipped to meet it. Over 8 weeks, we work with the body, breath, nervous system, mindset, and emotional awareness to support resilience before, during, and after stress moments. So you're not just surviving pressure, you're riding the wave with more ease, bouncing back with less effort, and creating resilience that is sustained. But the journey doesn't end there. The whole point of being resilient, of being able to have energy and vitality and to get your spark back, is so that you can invest your energy in the things that you truly are passionate about and become creative, inspired, and have the life of joy and authenticity that you seek without burning out. I'm currently taking applications for this program, so if this speaks to you in a big bad way, then I want to know. Please go check out the link in the show notes, and it'll bring you to the application form. And after that, I will be in touch with you personally. Hope to see you inside that challenge. Before we close, I'd like to invite you into this guided breathing practice. Take a moment now to settle into your body and close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. You can also just soften your gaze. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your breath arrive just as it is. There's nothing you need to fix, nothing you need to force. Just notice that you're breathing. Take a slow breath in through your nose, feeling it fill your chest, your ribs, your belly. And exhale gently through your mouth as if you're fogging a mirror. Again, breathing in and breathing out, letting the day fall away. Now imagine your breath creating a gentle container around you. Not a wall, not a cage, but a boundary of care. Breathing in, I gather myself. Breathing out, I let go. Let the breath soften, slower, deeper, moving through your heart and down into your belly, your center of knowing. Now place one hand on your heart and one on your belly, if that feels right for you. And offer yourself these words. I am allowed to soften. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to be held by my own breath. Breathing in, kindness. Breathing out, self-forgiveness. And when you're ready, begin to notice the space around you again. The surface beneath you, the sounds in the room. Carry this softness with you, not as something fragile, but as something powerful. A quiet power that nourishes your resilience from the inside out. If this episode resonates with you, I invite you to support the podcast in whatever way feels right. By sharing it, leaving a review, adding your voice to the conversation would be amazing, or making a donation to help keep this space alive. Your presence here matters more than you know. Well, my lovelies, I hope you feel uplifted and inspired. Remember, your fire is sacred. Hold it, nurture it, and let it light your path without burning out. And I hope that you'll join me for the next episode of Contain Her Magic, a sacred space to honor your path, discover your unique gifts, and to unapologetically embody your truth and your joy. I'm Sonia Baillon. Until next time, burn bright and hold on to your magic.